met Daniel at a charity gala 5 years ago. He was charming, successful, and confident in that way that comes from always having been the smartest person in the room. A senior partner at a prestigious law firm, he wore his accomplishments like a well-tailored suit, visible, impressive, impossible to ignore. I was there representing the small nonprofit where I worked as a program coordinator. My dress was from a consignment shop, my shoes were 2 years old, and I'd taken the subway to the event. When Daniel approached me at the bar, I assumed he was just being polite. "You look bored," he said, handing me a glass of champagne. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone who's equally bored," he smiled. Daniel Hayworth. Claire Monroe. He asked what I did, and when I told him, his expression shifted into something that looked like admiration. "That's wonderful. We need more people dedicated to making a real difference instead of just making money." It should have been my first clue. We started dating, and it was exciting at first. He took me to expensive restaurants, Broadway shows, weekend trips to the Hamptons. He insisted on paying for everything. "I make plenty," he'd say whenever I offered to split the bill. "Let me take care of you." It felt romantic, generous. I didn't realize I was auditioning for the role of woman who needs taking care of. After a year, he proposed. The wedding was elegant. Daniel's parents spared no expense. His mother made a few comments about my humble background, but Daniel always defended me. "Claire doesn't care about material things," he'd tell them. "That's what I love about her." Again, I missed the subtext. We moved into a beautiful penthouse in Tribeca. The views were stunning, the finishes were impeccable, and the monthly rent was more than I'd earned in 6 months at my nonprofit job. Daniel paid for everything: rent, utilities, groceries, the housekeeper who came twice a week. He insisted I didn't need to contribute financially. "Your job is important work," he'd say. "The money isn't great, but someone has to help the less fortunate. I'm happy to support us both." I should have questioned why he never asked about my finances. Why he assumed I had nothing. Why he seemed to need me to need him. But I was in love, and I told myself he was being generous. The cracks started showing about 2 years into our marriage. Daniel became more critical of my work. Still at that little nonprofit? His colleagues would ask at firm events, and I'd see him tense. He started making comments about my salary in private. "Don't you ever want to make real money? Have you thought about getting an MBA? You're smart enough. It's just, my associates make more than you do. It's a little embarrassing." I laughed it off at first. Then I started feeling self-conscious. Small, like my work, which I found meaningful and fulfilling, was somehow less valuable because it didn't come with a 6-figure salary. Last month, things came to a head. Daniel came home from a firm dinner in a foul mood. One of his partners had just announced his wife's promotion to CFO of a Fortune 500 company. Everyone was congratulating them, Daniel said, pouring himself a scotch, asking about her new role. Meanwhile, I had to stand there knowing my wife makes $45,000 a year coordinating programs for homeless youth. "I thought you said my work was important." "It is. But Claire, be realistic. You're 34 years old and you make less than my secretary. Don't you have any ambition?" Something in his tone made my stomach drop. "Are you serious right now?" "I'm just saying I work my ass off to maintain our lifestyle. Meanwhile, you're content to piddle around at a job that barely covers your student loans. It's not exactly equal partnership. I never asked you to pay for everything. You insisted, because I had to. What was I supposed to do? Let my wife take the subway and wear consignment clothes? I have a reputation to maintain." There it was. The truth underneath all that apparent generosity. I wasn't his partner. I was his charity case. His proof of what a good, magnanimous man he was for loving someone beneath his station. "Maybe you should marry someone at your level," I said quietly. "Maybe I should have." He drained his glass. "I can't keep living with someone who doesn't match my ambition, who doesn't understand what it means to really succeed." "Then don't." He looked at me, surprised. "What? If you're that unhappy, leave. I'm not going to apologize for choosing meaningful work over a big paycheck." "Fine." He stood up. "I'll stay at the club tonight. We can discuss divorce proceedings tomorrow." He left. I sat in our beautiful penthouse looking out at the glittering Manhattan skyline, and I started laughing. Not hysterical laughter. Just the deep, genuine amusement of someone who's just realized they've been watching a one-man show where they were cast as a prop. Because Daniel didn't know the truth. He'd never asked the right questions. And I'd never corrected his assumptions. The next morning, he came back with his lawyer voice on, calm, professional, ready to negotiate terms. He sat across from me at the kitchen island, yellow legal pad in front of him. "I've thought about this rationally," he began. "I'm willing to be generous in the divorce. I'll give you 6 months to find a new apartment. I'll cover your security deposit and first month's rent. And I think a settlement of $50,000 is fair, given the short length of our marriage and the financial disparity." "That's very generous," I said neutrally. "I'm not trying to leave you destitute, Claire. Despite our differences, I did care about you. I want to make sure you land on your feet. I appreciate that. But I think we should talk about how we're dividing the assets fairly." He looked confused. "What assets?" "Claire, I'm not trying to be cruel, but you don't have assets. Your nonprofit salary barely covers your personal expenses." "Right, about that." I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app, turning it toward him. "These are my personal checking and savings accounts." He glanced at the screen, then did a double take. His face went pale. That can't be right. That says $3.2 million. 3.4, actually. That's just in liquid accounts. There's more in investment portfolios. He stared at me like I'd started speaking a foreign language. "Where did you get that money?" "Inheritance, mostly. My grandmother died when I was 25 and left me her estate. Plus some smart investments over the years." "Your grandmother? You never asked about my family finances. You assumed that because I work at a nonprofit and wear consignment clothes, I must be poor." I took a sip of my coffee. "I let you assume that because I wanted to see who you really were. Turns out you're someone who measures people's worth by their income." His mouth opened and closed. "Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you ask? In 5 years together, you never once inquired about my financial situation. You just decided I was broke and needed saving. But the penthouse. I've been paying... Actually, about that, I pulled out another document. This is the deed to this apartment. I bought it 8 years ago, before we even met. The rent you've been paying? That's been going into an account I set up. I was going to tell you eventually and suggest we use it for a joint investment. But you were so insistent on taking care of me that I didn't want to bruise your ego." Daniel stood up abruptly, pacing the length of the kitchen. "This is insane. You've been lying to me for our entire relationship." "I never lied. I told you exactly what I did for work and how much it paid. You made assumptions about what that meant. And every time you made a comment about supporting us or covering our lifestyle, I let you believe what you wanted to believe." "Why? Why would you do that?" "Because I wanted to know if you loved me or the idea of me. Turns out it was the latter. You didn't love Claire the person. You loved Claire the grateful, financially dependent wife who made you feel important and successful and generous." He sank back into his chair. "So what, this was all some kind of test? Some sick game?" "Not a game. Just a boundary. I grew up watching my mother stay with my father because she couldn't afford to leave. He controlled everything through money, where she went, what she wore, who she saw. When my grandmother left me her estate, she made me promise I'd never let a man have that kind of power over me." I met his eyes. "So yes, I kept my finances private. And I'm glad I did, because it showed me exactly who you are. I'm not your father. No. But you're someone who thinks earning less makes me less. Someone who's embarrassed by my career and every word. You've been thinking it for months, maybe years. Last night you just finally said it out loud." He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I used to find endearing. "So what happens now? Now we get divorced. You can have your lawyer draw up the papers. I'll be fair about asset division, even though this apartment and most of our possessions are technically mine. I don't want your money. Good, I wasn't offering it." I walked toward the bedroom, then paused. "Oh, and Daniel? You'll need to find a new place to stay. I'm giving you 30 days to move out. Since I own the penthouse and all." His face flushed red. "You can't be serious." "I'm completely serious. I'll put it in writing if you'd like." Landlord to tenant. "Very official," I smiled. "Don't worry, I won't charge you rent for the next month. Consider it my parting gift." Over the following weeks, Daniel moved into a corporate apartment while our lawyers handled the choice. Someone who just offered me 6 months and $50,000 like you were doing me a favor. I stood up. Daniel, you're a good lawyer. You're charming and intelligent. But you're also shallow and classist, and you value people based on their net worth. I deserve better than that. Claire, wait. Let's talk about this. I was angry last night. I didn't mean me divorce. His attorney tried to argue that I'd been deceptive about my finances, but mine calmly pointed out that I'd never signed a prenup claiming poverty, never committed fraud, and had simply allowed my husband to make baseless assumptions. The divorce was finalized 3 months later. Daniel got his personal belongings, his car, and his wounded pride. I kept the penthouse, my investments, and my dignity. The story spread through his firm like wildfire. Apparently, several people had known or suspected I had money. My grandmother had been something of a legend in New York philanthropic circles. They'd assumed Daniel knew. The fact that he didn't, that he'd spent years condescending to his secretly wealthy wife, became the subject of much gossip and some barely concealed amusement. Daniel's mother called me once, right after the divorce was final. You humiliated my son, she said coldly. Your son humiliated himself by valuing people based on their tax returns. He loved you. He loved an idea of me. There's a difference. I paused. Mrs. Hayworth, your son is a good attorney. He's smart and capable. But he's also been taught that money equals worth, and that kindness to people with less is charity rather than basic decency. That's not something I could fix. That's something he has to figure out on his own. Exciting work. He nodded, that familiar tight smile, understand. She hung up without another word. I stayed at my nonprofit job. I still make $45,000 a year. I still wear consignment clothes most of the time, though now it's because I genuinely enjoy the treasure hunt of thrift shopping, not because I can't afford retail. I still take the subway. I still live in my penthouse with the $1 million view. And I'm dating again, casually. I'm upfront about my finances now, not in a bragging way, but in a clear, boundaried way. I work at a nonprofit because it's meaningful to me. I'm also financially independent. I don't need someone to take care of me. I need someone to be a partner. It's amazing how that simple honesty filters people. The ones who are threatened by it disappear quickly. The ones who are intrigued by it stick around. I'm learning to spot the difference faster now. Last week, I ran into Daniel at a restaurant. He was with a woman, young, polished, wearing designer everything. She looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine spread on trophy wives of Manhattan. Claire, he said, standing awkwardly. This is Amber. Amber, this is Claire. Your ex-wife, I supplied helpfully. Nice to meet you, Amber. She looked uncomfortable, probably having heard stories. Daniel cleared his throat. How have you been? Really well. The nonprofit just received a major grant. We're expanding our youth programs. It's appearing. The one that meant he was thinking about my small salary and feeling superior again. That's great. Amber just made partner at her consulting firm. Congratulations, I said genuinely. Thanks, Amber said. She seemed nice, actually. I felt a little bad for her. We made awkward small talk for another minute, then I excused myself. As I walked away, I heard Amber ask, "Is that the penthouse in Tribeca?" I didn't stay to hear his answer. That night, I stood on my balcony with a glass of wine, looking out at the city lights. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus, an architect I'd been seeing for a few weeks. He knew about my finances. He knew about my job. He thought both were interesting facts about me, neither more important than the other. Still on for dinner tomorrow? There's a new Ethiopian place in Brooklyn I want to try. I smiled and texted back. Perfect. I'll meet you there. No assumptions. No performances, no tests. Just two people getting to know each other honestly. The best part about Daniel thinking I was poor? It taught me that I didn't need to prove anything to anyone. My worth isn't in my bank account or my job title. It's in how I treat people, what I value, and whether I'm living authentically. Daniel needed me to be less than him so he could feel more than he was. That was his limitation, not mine. Now I live in my beautiful penthouse that he never knew was mine, doing work I love that he never understood was valuable, with a peace of mind that no amount of money could buy. He wanted a woman who matched his ambition and his income. I hope he finds her. I genuinely do. As for me, I found something better. I found myself, and it turns out I was never the charity case in our relationship. I was always the one being generous, giving him chance after chance to see me as I actually was, rather than as he needed me to be. He never took it. That was his loss, not mine. And now, standing in my penthouse, financially secure and emotionally free, I realize that sometimes the best revenge isn't proving someone wrong about you. It's knowing your own worth so deeply that their opinion stops mattering entirely. I own this penthouse. But more importantly, I own my life. And that's worth more than Daniel could ever